So, we're moving on. The next session is about creating knowledge, and for this session, mostly I get to sit here and listen to the fantastic speakers, starting with Professor Lorraine Leeson, who will host the session.
Well, hello everybody. It is my absolute pleasure to be here. I want to thank you for the kind invitation to participate and to all of you for coming along. I have the great honour of serving as the Associate Vice Provost for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion here in the university, and this particular initiative is exactly what it is that we want to see more of. It's this kind of engagement across disciplines with stakeholders, both within and external to the universities, people who are experiencing life lived in many different ways, as well as those who are interested in researching from a medical perspective or from a social or cultural perspective. And I think that what you're doing here is just wonderful. So without further ado, let me actually shut up and introduce you to the people you came here to listen to. Let me introduce us to our first speaker, if we have them ready to join us online. It's terrible. When I put my glasses on, I can't see anybody in the room, and when I don't, I can't see anything on the page in front of me. This getting old malarkey isn't great. Hello, everybody. You're all very, very welcome. First up, we have the wonderful Nikki Taylor and playwright Rosa Peterson. And I know that Nikki focuses on art access and co-creative practice, and she's going to co-present today with Rosa, who herself is a playwright with vascular dementia. And you know, Nikki, when I was checking you out online ahead of today, I was really impressed to see that you say that your personal hero is Rosa. So what a wonderful opportunity for us to meet you both here, even if that is virtually. I very much look forward to hearing what you both have to say. So welcome to Trinity.
Thank you very much. We actually pre-recorded our presentation for today, and the team at TCD are going to share that with you. Hello, my name's Nikki. I work as a researcher and also in a theatre. I'm interested in learning from people with dementia through the arts and creativity.
My name is Rosa. I live with vascular dementia. I'm also a member of the DEEP group and Our Time.
Rosa and I pre-recorded our conversation because she's not available today, and also because it was a better option for us. We had quite a few attempts to get a version we were happy with. We watched some of our recordings together, and Rosa really liked the introduction you've just heard, where she's laughing, so she decided she'd like to use that one. Pre-recording gave us a chance to make some decisions about what we wanted to share, so you as an audience get to hear perspectives that have been edited, tidied up, a version that fits nicely in this 10-minute slot. But what you don't see is our hesitations or moments where we didn't get to a comfortable response. You don't see our process. And process is so important in working creatively, but it's a vulnerable space where we might try something for the first time, we pause or lose a thread. Pre-recording means a contributor with dementia isn't put on the spot, doesn't have to respond in a time frame assigned by someone else that might feel daunting or exposing. And these are some of the important considerations when we co-create. We have to shift the power dynamic and change the rules to best suit the people who aren't being heard, who we want to hear. And this is how we create the conditions to hear different stories of dementia. It's creative co-production, a practice that I've been using for many years and one I've recently described and I'm researching at Leeds Beckett University's Centre for Dementia Research. I've learned that when we truly share power in creative processes, people with dementia are able to actively make confident, artistic decisions, to take on new creative responsibility, and to offer crucial mutual support, to co-create environments in which it feels safe to contribute. Rosa is without doubt a writer, though she's unlikely to describe herself as one as part of her introduction. She's going to read from a story she created during lockdown with her writing partner Barney Bardsley. Barney is a professional writer. She's been writing her whole life. Rosa began to write after being diagnosed with dementia because she was brave enough to turn up one day at Leeds Playhouse, where I run groups for people with dementia to explore their creativity. In response to the pandemic, Rosa and Barney took part in one-to-one sessions, talking on the phone to co-create a fairy tale. Here's a part of it.
The purple coat. My coat is a short robe with a bit of a flare. It has 3/4 sleeves and they're flared too. It's purple, the sign of healing. Light purple with square patterns all over it. When I put my coat on, I feel happy and free. I go walking in my coat and I can fly up to heaven too. When I look down, I see birds and clouds. Beneath the clouds, I see all the people on the ground. And there are loads of cars and lorries all rushing about. But up in the clouds, it's still and calm.
Rosa's story tells of a quest, being set challenges by a woman she meets. She has to face her fears and be brave. She uses her incredible imagination and takes us with her into a world of magic, nature and flight. I love the imagery Rosa uses, and I wonder what you'll take from her story.
Journey into the night, then it's time to do my second task. The old lady knows I'm scared of the night time, so she wants to know if I have the strength to do it, to walk into the forest on my own at night. I don't have to find anything this time, just do it alone. I start off walking, but I fly when I am ready. I wear my purple coat with the white wings folded behind. The wings are white, plain, medium size. They can wrap around me as I walk between the trees to protect me. I have nothing else, nothing in my pockets. The horse takes me to the edge of the woods. It's too dangerous for him to go inside, so I tie him to a tree at the entrance to the forest. What's it like inside is dark, and the moon and the stars are glittering above. It's a rough path, not easy to walk on, so I walk very carefully, but the moonlight through the trees helps me to see, and the path is quite wide. There are lots of different noises. Owls hooting in the trees, to-wick, to-oo, and hedgehogs underfoot, quietly scuttling and scrunching in the underground. I'm a bit scared, but I know I have to do it. I come to a clearing and I can see foxes and their cubs playing. I sit and watch them. It's a moment of calm, and as I watch them, I'm not frightened anymore. When I look ahead, the trees are denser, so now it's time that I must fly. I say I'm off. My wings open up and I fly above the trees just for a few minutes, then I turn around, head back to the clearing. I land and fold back my wings. Then I walk out along the same path because I don't want to get lost. It's just enough light to see.
Like any act of creativity, Rosa's story is a gift to those who choose to listen. And each of us will take something different from it. I love the line, "It's a rough path, not easy to walk on, so I walk very carefully," as I think that's true for many people navigating their experience of dementia. I also think it says a lot about Rosa that she's willing to protect her horse by leaving him outside the forest and walking on alone. This next section is us having a chat about what creativity means to Rosa, and then we'll finish up with Rosa reading another section of her story. Why do you think it is important that people with dementia are encouraged to be creative?
Because they'd be surprised at what they can do, because I thought I couldn't do it, but I had a lot of patience, I did it, so anybody can do it. Even if it's only one verse they can write, at least they've done it.
What is it about stories that you
You
enjoy?
can just let the imagination run riot. Nothing's wrong.
Yeah,
It's just how you feel at the time.
yeah. That's so important, isn't it?
Yeah. You can feel sad, but if you're sad, you can just say it in words, and by the time you read it, you're feeling a lot better.
Yeah. And for you, is it the words?
It's the words.
Yeah.
Mean a lot.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know, because words can say how you feel without you having to say it personally out loud. You can just write it down and pass it on, and you don't have to speak if you don't want to.
Is it hard sometimes to
Yes,
speak?
just sometimes.
So putting that in a story or a poem.
It's easier.
And do you think you can make a difference with those stories
I
and
think
poems?
you can. Because I've listened to other people's stories. I think, oh yes, I've done that, and it brings back memories. So which is good.
Yeah, that's lovely. It connects you, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it does.
What difference would you like your stories to make for other people?
That you can do things if you've got dementia. You'd be surprised what you can do. Just one, even if you only write one little verse, doesn't matter. At least you've done it, and it'd be absolutely brilliant what you wrote.
If there was somebody who was just diagnosed with dementia, who was thinking about getting involved in a creative group, what would you say to them?
Just tell them to come and sit in and see how we do it. Have a cup of tea, have a chat. It's so informal. There's no, you can't do this, you can't do that. Everybody says what they like without being jumped on.
Yeah.
So it's really nice and relaxing.
That's brilliant.
Especially when you have a cup of tea and a biscuit at the end.
How easy is it for you to come up with the stories?
It's harder now. I could do it, but now I find it much harder. Whether because my dementia's getting worse, I don't know, but I find it a lot harder. Unless somebody plants a seed, and then it might start sprouting.
That's a lovely way of looking at it. Who are the people that plant seeds for you?
Barney and Nikki.
Tell me about Barney. Tell me about...
She just puts something in my head and then we just talk about it and then the words just come out. She writes it and rearranges it.
Do you feel like you're in control of your story, even though you're working with someone else?
Oh, yeah, I'm in control of it. They always ask me if I want anything altering. But I just say leave it up to them anyway, because they know better.
But do they? Because it's your story. Yeah, I think that's quite an interesting thing in relation to how people understand the experience of dementia. I mean, I'd be interested in what you think. Do you think that people with dementia are listened to?
I think they are more now than they used to. Still, people are biased against it, don't understand it. They get one with dementia and think that other person should be exactly the same as that one other person they know. But it doesn't work out that way. Every dementia is different. Affects everybody different ways.
What stories do you think you'd still like to tell?
I don't know now. Somebody will have to plant the seed and see what happens. Riding safely home, I go towards Blue the horse, climb on him and ride back to the cottage. I get off, go inside. The old lady's sitting there. She's made me a cup of tea and a piece of cake. She says, "What did you see in the woods?" So I tell her. "You have done what I asked you to do," she replies. "I knew you were scared of the night, but you did it." "Yes, when I started out, I was scared, but now I'm happy because I managed to do it, and I am proud." The end.
Microphone, thank you. That was just wonderful. Thank you so much to you both, Nikki and Rosa. I think you've planted many seeds in this audience, and I'm sure that they will bear fruit in the question and answer time to come. Without further hesitation, let's move on to our next presenter, who is Kirti Ranshud, who's author of the Lancet article, Transcending Global Health Dogma. And I know that Kirti is a neurologist who's based in Johannesburg in South Africa. We are absolutely delighted to welcome you to join us today, and we very much look forward to learning more about your work and telling us everything that you have to say. So the floor is all yours.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here, even if it is virtually in Dublin. I have such lovely memories, having spent a year there during my fellowship with the Global Brain Health Institute. What I knew of Ireland before, I would have learned from its poets and musicians and Roy Keane. But I will focus on one of the lines from a Yeats poem, Night and light and half light. I only understood half light after spending a year in Dublin. I still had a lot of time, but yes. I am in Johannesburg, which, as many of you may know, in one of its previous incarnations, was a very rich mining town. It has these rich seams of gold running across the city, actually. And these were mined, extracted, exported, and refined somewhere else. So for me, growing up in Johannesburg, what I would have mostly seen were the toxic remnants, the toxic mine dumps that used to be scattered all across Johannesburg. It is a lovely city though, and I don't want you not to visit because of that. Today, I'm going to be discussing what we have within our traditions and our cultures that have the potential to support better brain health and health as a cohesive whole. And I'm going to start with a quote. We lived in a world where tradition gave rise to knowledge, and that knowledge allowed us to live in the world and not against it. This is from poet and academic Dr. Jirga Galau Waldeus, and he's describing knowledge from his community in Ethiopia, but I think relevant to many of us across the world. And it says a lot that knowledge is relevant when it is, in a sense, grown in the place where you're at, when knowledge has context, right? So I want you to travel with me now to a part of South Africa that I love called Limpopo. It is in the north of South Africa and it stretches all the way to Zimbabwe, a beautiful part of the world that has some of the most amazing fertile soil. They grow everything there. Mangoes, lychees, avocados, peaches, cherries, anything and absolutely delicious. In this part of the world, there's also this ancient cycad forest, the Majaji cycad forest, that's millions and millions of years old. And if you actually visit it, you really are transported back in time. The northern part of Limpopo has hundreds of sacred baobab trees. These trees are larger than elephants, and thousands of years old. And in this part as well, there's the remnants of an ancient African civilization, Mapungubwe. So within this landscape, there's amazing people, varied cultures, both indigenous and immigrants, speaking a host of languages, from Pedi, Tsonga, Venda, Shangaan, Gujarati, English, Afrikaans, and more. And within this landscape, this amazing cultural landscape, there are amazing, generous, talented artists. And really lots of artists. And it reminds me a bit of the poets from Ireland. When I was in Ireland, I was trying to work out why are there so many fabulous poets? And if anybody has an answer, please let me know. But like the poets in Ireland, they are the artists in this part of the world. I'm going to focus on visual arts. They use a wide variety of mediums such as embroidery, beadwork, pottery, painting, and sculpture. Artists such as Noria Mabaso, Jackson Shungwani, and Johannes Masongani. I'm going to focus on the biography of one particular artist, Dr. Putuma Sioka, who came from a village in Limpopo. And I was introduced to his work on one of my trips to the Wits Art Museum. And his biography both intrigued and resonated with me. So basically, many years ago, he was having these recurrent nightmares, horrible nightmares. In fact, the one sculpture showed him wrestling with a snake that was larger than him. And because of these recurrent nightmares, he went to see a traditional healer in his village. And the treatment that the traditional healer prescribed was that he start sculpting. Now, how profound is that? Because in essence, he made the subconscious concern tangible so that Dr. Sioka could understand and process it differently and problem solve in a way that made sense to him. I'm going to discuss the neuroscience behind why this is also so fascinating. But in no way do I want the neuroscience to detract from this knowledge system. The neuroscience is complementary. This knowledge system that the traditional healer and Dr. Sioka belonged to had a way of validating this knowledge. So the traditional healer understood the potential of sculpture to help with insomnia and with the recurrent nightmares. Right? So the neuroscience behind how art works, I absolutely love it because I also love art and galleries. But what it does is it activates a network in the brain called the default mode network that I like to think of as the daydreaming network because it tells its functions a little bit better. Basically, this network allows us to relive or recreate the past, project or imagine the future, and in the present to understand self and potentially to understand others. So in essence, it increases self-awareness, okay? There's lots of other research in terms of what art does, including improving psychological resilience, reducing stress response, and activating the reward center of the brain so that you feel better. So in essence, what the traditional healer did was empower Dr. Sioka with a treatment that increased self-awareness, increased psychological resilience, reduced stress, and helped him to feel better. And that's absolutely amazing. Now, what is also amazing and distressing, actually, is that only one of these systems is considered access to health care. Only one of these knowledge systems is valued so that you are considered to have received an education. And you have to wonder why. Is it about health or is it about power? Is it about knowledge and education or is it about power? Because nothing in my medical education would have allowed me to prescribe sculpture for somebody with insomnia or with recurrent nightmares, right? And I have the greatest respect for the biomedical system. I am a neurologist, and more than that, I was a very, very junior doctor at Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital in Soweto at the peak of the HIV epidemic when there was no access to ARVs. There wasn't even light at the end of the tunnel. It was just dark. So access to effective, affordable antiretroviral treatment changed everything. So I have absolute profound respect for the system. But having grown up in the system, I'm also aware of its limitations. It can't really do everything, especially in a cohesive manner if we want to talk about health. Within our traditions and our cultures, we have so much wealth that has the potential to support health and more, just because I'm focusing on health. I'm going to continue with the quote from Dr. Waldees. So if we bring knowledge that is not based on our people's experiences, we make our people slaves to other people's knowledge. And I was thinking about this. It's a bit like having a map of London. And it's a lovely, lovely map. It is accurate. It's wonderfully color-coded. And you can get from point A to point B with absolute efficiency and accuracy. But because this map is so well made, and because I love it so much, I take it when I'm traveling to Dublin. And I try to navigate using this map from the airport to Trinity College. And sometimes it feels like that's what we're trying to do in our healthcare, particularly with trying to promote health. Within our traditions, I was doing this work because I was looking at dementia prevention strategies and then how to keep the brain healthy. And when you look at what actually supports brain health, I realized that so much is actually embedded in the culture that I come from and the cultures that I'm surrounded by in South Africa and when I traveled. So I don't have enough time to actually go through all the examples or to discuss the science behind it, but I'm going to list a few of them, and I would like you to just think about or write down what you have within your tradition, within your culture, within your community or family, because also within a culture, we're not homogeneous. What you have within this to actually support these activities that may actually encourage brain health and reduce dementia risk. So activities that could potentially encourage social interaction or social cohesion, right? We know that this actually reduces dementia risk. Activities that promote intergenerational living or intergenerational activities, meditation or mindfulness, activities that stimulate your brain, and all the arts, visual arts, music, dancing, poetry, storytelling. Often the arts is so ingrained again in the way we live that we don't even call it by these terms. In fact, many of these things we don't call by these terms. And there's a functionality to the way the arts are used in many communities around the world, right? It is used to heal or to help, to communicate or create community, to protest, to facilitate personal or spiritual development. Again, so yeah, we just have lots of resources that sometimes get dismissed or minimized or ridiculed. I'm going to end with a quote from my favorite Irish musician, Van Morrison. When all the parts of the puzzle start to look like they fit, then I must remember there'll be days like this. And that's the reason I do this work. I think we will get to a point where there will be days like this. All these different knowledge systems are different parts of a puzzle that allow us to create a cohesive vision of health within our traditions, within our cultures, our families, and our communities. Our cultures are our wealth. They are our seam of gold. And before all we're left with are the toxic mind dumps, we need to actually learn how to protect, nurture, and grow this wealth. Respect these knowledge systems for better health and really for better lives for all of us. Thank you.
Well, Kirti, from the half-light of this little island to your beautiful sunny spot on the other part of the world, I suppose we should also quote a little bit of Van Morrison back at you and say that you're probably bringing us a little bit of enlightenment here today. So I guess we should knock on wood and carry water. That was absolutely wonderful. I'm a linguist in my day life, and your conversation about the importance of cultural diversity and understanding the ecosystems in which people operate and the multiple and multiplicities of values that that brings is so important. And I think it also speaks again to the fact that we can't take a siloed perspective on any one aspect of life, can we? We have to think about people operating in a context or in multiple contexts and how those contexts support growth and development and flourishing, regardless of the health status of an individual at any moment in time. So thank you so very much for that. That was wonderful. Our next presenter, if we may, is Ma Reina, who is a researcher. Seriously, what a lineup you've got here. I'm very impressed by everybody, and I'm sure the audience is too. But our next speaker is a researcher, filmmaker, and part of the Lived Experience Network, and it's nice to make, exploring to what extent creativity can promote well-being and health for community groups and individuals. And she asks, is there a place for craft practice in the neuroplasticity revolution? And I know she's made some movies that you can check out online. But before you do that, we get to hear from her directly here. So over to you. The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me along today. I think for my talk is going to be in three short parts, and I'll firstly briefly introduce LENS, which is the Lived Experience Network and what we do, and then I'll touch on the value of creativity and lived experience voices in academic research, and then I'll finish with talking about my own experience of using creativity to care for my mother and the lessons that I've learned and still carry with me today. So I've worked in the arts and community sector for 10 years, and I've been one of the London regional champions for Lens since 2019. And more recently, in 2021, I became one of their co-directors. So Lens was set up as one of the recommendations for the 2017 Creative Health Report by the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Arts, Health and Wellbeing. And Lens is a network of people with lived experience of ill health who provide personal and powerful stories of the benefits of using creativity to support health and well-being. And the network is steered by champions from 9 regions across England. And these regional champions work to bring people together to share knowledge and grow collaborations and partnerships locally and nationally. So in that regard, we are a network of networks. And Lens champions also act as a conduit to share information between grassroots practice and national policy, advocating for easy and fair access for people to participate in art and culture at all stages of life. We encourage national, regional and local organisations to develop co-creation and co-production strategies to embed the voices of lived experience at the heart of the art, culture and well-being movement. And this includes working closely in partnership with the Culture, Health and Wellbeing Alliance and the National Centre for Creative Health. So why do people with lived experience of using creativity to improve well-being get involved with community-based projects? Well, typically, voices of lived experience offer invaluable knowledge and insight into health and social issues from a personal perspective. And to give one example, earlier this year, the Lens worked with Comic Relief as part of their assessment process for the Walkers and Comic Relief Smiles Fund, which is a competitive funding programme for community-based projects delivering early intervention work for adults considered at risk of experiencing poor mental health. In previous years, Comic Relief would have relied on trained funding assessors, but this year, each Comic Relief assessor was teamed with a member from Lens. We were formally referred to as experts by experience, but more importantly, as people with lived experience of using creativity for better mental health, we were able to offer a nuanced understanding of what are often complex socio-economic situations that can be experienced differently by different groups. And thinking about the value of creativity and the value of the lived experience voice in academic research, in my role as a co-director of the Lens, plus my other role as an artist researcher, I was part of the Community COVID Research Project led by Professor Helen Chatterjee at University College London. And the Community COVID Project, which ran from 2020 to 2021, investigated how participants who self-identified as vulnerable and shielding were engaging with community-based assets and cultural activities during the COVID-19 pandemic national lockdowns. The project also investigated what types of resources were preferenced and easily accessible during COVID-19 restrictions. Using a mix of quantitative and qualitative methods for collecting and analysing data, the project reported hundreds of creative resources, activities and programmes that people participated in during lockdown, both online and offline. Many were new programmes and some were adaptations of existing programmes. Most were targeting isolation with mild and moderate mental health issues, such as depression and anxiety. Equally important was that the participants' voices and their creative journey was represented throughout the final Community COVID report. These voices offered a deeper and nuanced understanding of the value of creativity for people shielding during the pandemic. So as well as using traditional formats of focus groups and semi-structured interviews to capture the voice of the participant, we also conducted 2 focus groups run as creative workshops. one of which was a collage workshop that I ran with one of the co-investigators, Dr. Rabia Mughal. These workshops operated as a welcoming and democratic space where each participant, including myself and my colleague, worked with paper, glue, and everyday materials to construct a visual representation of our pandemic experience. The finished collages were a wonderful addition to the focus group format because they offered a visual gateway to the participants' pre-reflective thinking that then accompanied more reflective statements during the discussion. In essence, the participants used their college artwork as a visual metaphor and a safe bridge to talk about pandemic experiences that might have been more difficult to talk about directly. So now to draw more closely on my own lived experience and using creativity to create new knowledge, crafting with my mother was an opportunity to work with what is there rather than focusing on what is presumed to be lost. I used to be a dementia carer for my mother, and she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2014. And at the point of the dementia diagnosis disclosure, it's not uncommon for close family and friends to experience anticipatory grief for a non-death loss. But at that time, I was not able to acknowledge this for myself, and I dealt with my anticipatory grief by getting busy with task-oriented care and becoming increasingly hypervigilant to physical and psychological risks that could be a source of danger or distress for my mother, both inside and outside of the home. I was, or perhaps I should say, I felt I was being very productive, but it was exhausting. I was also emotionally disconnected from myself and my mother, and my identity as a daughter felt like a mirage in the distance. But I kept myself busy for the first year with a to-do list of ADLs, activities for daily living. But my well-meaning but misjudged busy caring was taking everyday opportunities from my mother to be agentic and autonomous. And she was slowly becoming a passive recipient of my overly busy care. So about a year later, 2015, creativity became a lifeline, not just for my mother, but for me. And crafting together became a way for us to reconnect emotionally, to reconnect as mother and daughter, and reconnect as expert and novice. I made a short film from a series of craft encounters with my mother. And towards the end of this presentation, I'll show a short 2-minute excerpt from that film. My mother was the expert, and crafting together became encounters of knowledge creation and knowledge sharing. She would teach me craft techniques she hadn't practiced for decades, but was able to pick up with a precision that I'm still in awe of to this day. She would appraise my work and with encouraging comments and with suggestions of improvement. As you'll see in the film, when talking without visual or material prompt, her recall of episodic or semantic memories is impaired, like not being able to recall the name of the stitch. But when her embroidery is in her hand, she was always attuned and responsive to the haptic and sensory experience of crafting and the materiality of the work. And as if mimicking the fluidity of the movements of her hands engaged in meaningful work, her talk and conversation flowed. So now you'll see a short clip of the film.
Oh, I can't remember the name of the stitches.
Would it be something like Saturn stitch
Somebody would be
or daisy
Saturn
or chain?
stitch. We used to do something with cross stitch. You know, I said I was 14, 15 years old.
Yeah.
I'm in my 80s,
Yeah.
you know. And you haven't been doing these things for years. You forget, you know, what they were, you know.
But
I used to have one for every day of the week. You know, one would be the woman doing her washing, another one she'd be doing hanging out her clothes, you know, another one she'd be ironing, like, you know. You wash on one day, the next day, or maybe a couple of days, you iron it, like,
yeah.
you know, so each of the week there was something, you know.
so they were on tea towels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we call them tea towels or kitchen towels. They're about the same, tea towels, kitchen towels. You know.
I did this one.
That's nice one. Did you do that as
Yeah.
well? Did you? Oh, that's good, Ma. So what you can do, well, you can do the same to the bottom, or you can take 2 stitches, like from that, and 2 from that, and it gives you like a little,
I like a zigzag.
something like that, you know. Well, that's good.
So in crafting together with my mother, not only did she show me how to hem stitch, but she also taught me how to care for her better and to care for myself better. And crafting was a way in which we were meaningfully crafting was a way in which we were meaningfully contributing to the world through our small acts of creativity. In her talk on Saturday at the beginning of this conference, Maureen Kennerleaf, the director of Arts Council of England, talked about how creativity nurtures empathy and how empathy is an emotional energy that is nurturing and sustainable. And this was very true of my experience of crafting with my mother. In that, crafting became very much part of everyday dementia care for the next 7 years. And at those times when we were crafting together, caring became very much a reciprocal act that was psychologically nurturing for both of us. And for me, it was a chance to step into and experience her life world, where those moments when we were crafting together, our shared experience was not dominated by dementia. And so thank you for letting me to share my experience with you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that. It was wonderful to have the opportunity to see you at work, to see you and your mother working collaboratively together. It really struck me from several of the presentations this afternoon, and indeed with the previous session, that a lot of the conversation is around power, about autonomy, about that delicate balance between agenthood and patienthood, one that occurs in this space, but also, you know, as a linguist, it's something that we talk about in semantics too. And I think that that's a very interesting thread to pick up on and perhaps dig into further. But I'm conscious that there may be questions in the room. Do you lovely people here or online have anything that you would like to ask our presenters?
And while people are looking for questions,
I have one.
Majority, you might want to come down and join us.
I have one online. So what, I think you can hear me. What advice do you have for those working in the healthcare field in terms of how do we draw upon traditional practices and non-conventional medicine approaches to improve patient outcomes or experiences? Maybe that's directed to Dr. Curti.
I was hoping it wasn't.
Sorry.
It's actually quite challenging. I think there's points where there's symmetry, like what I did in terms of using the neuroscience to understand better why a specific practice works. Like I said, I don't want to detract from that knowledge system and the validation process in that knowledge system. But I think those are the points of intersection. But also, my experience in terms of like yoga, I understand there's points where these two systems just are not going to intersect, you know. And so I think going forward, it's how do we respect these different systems? How do we create points of better communication between these different systems? And how then do we value the knowledge that comes out of these different systems? And I think also if our aim is actually better health, you know, if our aim is better health, we will find ways to actually navigate these contradictions. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Anybody else? Going. Please, the gentleman at the front. There's a mic coming for you. Oh, look at you, you're all ready.
I'm struck, but as I have been in several presentations through the last few days, of a sort of difference in language. And a feeling almost that art and craft, that's not as good as the academic world. But for me, art and craft has its own language and its own goodness. And I don't have to justify it other than it's fun, it's creative, it's interesting, it's worthwhile in itself. And I just wonder how you react to that notion that it can be a worthwhile end without having to have lots of footnotes and addenda and indices.
Nikki, I wonder if you might take that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, really. I think there are real hierarchies of knowledge and hierarchies of making knowledge, and we can't necessarily make arts practice fit into the boxes that are required for research or the clinical delivery. So yeah, I think it's very important to try and gain parity for the arts in those more clinical spaces and research spaces. But yeah, it should be able to sing to its own tune. So I do agree. And I think this is something that artists and arts organisations are acutely aware of when they are trying to speak other languages rather than their own.
Thank you for that. Maybe building on that, how do you avoid then having a hierarchy of expertise, if you like? How do we move away from that? Is that something that's possible and desirable?
Ma?
Thank you.
One for you.
Little prompts.
Well, yes, I mean, absolutely, it is desirable. And how you move away from it, I guess I'm trying to come up with a kind of a clean answer, but I don't know whether there is one. And I guess it's about forming sort of collaborations with people who are interested in that same thing of kind of breaking down those hierarchies, and who are willing to kind of come together and talk. So there isn't this hierarchy of kind of language or kind of terminology over one set of terminology or kind of knowledge systems, as Kirsty was saying, over another. So I think the ambition is there, but it feels like it's taken time. But there are people working towards it, and I think that's a positive step, definitely.
It sounds like a good
Sounds
place.
like a place to bridge.
It does indeed. So Dominic, be the bridge.
So I'll bridge. We're going to bridge from this into the next session, which is why we invited Paul to the stage. So we have to do technical, complicated things. So firstly, I'm going to thank Marana and Nikki Taylor and Rosa Peterson for a contribution, and Kirsty Ranchard, and also Lorraine Leeson. And what we're going to do is take some of the themes that were in that conversation. We're going to have a very brief conversation with Paul, and then we're going to go into the premiere of a new film, Creative Brainwork is full of great surprises. So in the conversation that we just listened to, and actually building over the last couple of days, has been all sorts of increasing complications, which is, I think, the place where creativity really starts to shine. How do you make new patterns? How do you assemble? How do you stretch out your understanding? Has been something that came through this morning's conversation. How do we create healthcare systems that are universal and equitable for people whose lives are existing at the intersection of not only a medical condition, but also a lived experience, whether that is a cultural context, an economic, social, economic, financial context. And it's been very much a kind of riff in the conversation in the presentations that we've just been delighted to listen to, but it's also part of the film that we're about to see, I believe. Paul Majari, many things. Well, firstly, why are you in Dublin? That's a good place to start.
Good question.
To Dublin?
I think first the question we should be asking is why am I sitting here? You know, 'cause I think the fact that we're even screening here today is really testament to how persuasive Dominic really is, and what a nurturer of talent he is, because he was really one of the first people that ensured that today, for the first time, this film gets to see the light of day and is shown to the world. As many of you guys know, us creatives can be quite precious, so I believe this film would still be in post right now, and maybe for a later release, and thanks to his persuasiveness, we've had to get cracking and moving, and finally this film can see the light of day, and what you guys are about to see today is a rough cut of what we believe is going to be leading to the second last cut of what's going to be the deal. So I am here as a fellow to answer your question.
Yeah.
With the Global Brain Health Institute, and yeah.
So at lunchtime we saw a work in progress. We saw the opera by Dana Walrath. We just are in the middle of a conversation about evolutions in progress, I think, evolutions in thought in healthcare systems. The film we're about to see is a work in progress. Give us a little couple of headlines. What's it about and where's it going to? When will it get released?
It is about a whole lot of other things that I hope you guys will get to see over there, but essentially we are trying to look at the issue of gender-based violence, understanding that, you know, the World Population Review actually rated South Africa as the most unsafest place for women in 2020. So gender-based violence is quite rife in our country. It also is an opportunity for us to really create a narrative, and what I believe is going to be the first character in popular culture to really be depicted as living with dementia on the film as well. So it looks at a number of inequities in South Africa. You know, we were talking about the power dynamics just now, and I think it sort of gives you a bit of a context between what life looks like between the have and the have-nots in South Africa, and some of the intersectionalities that are then paralleled when you introduce issues of gender, of, you know, the economics of the country, and yeah, it's packed with quite a number of thematic areas.
It has a title?
It does, The Deal.
There we go. So, before we play The Deal, I'd like a round of applause, please, to thank Nikki Taylor, Mara Rana, Curti Ranchard, Lorraine Leeson, and Rosa Peterson. To thank Paul Majari, and we will now delicately leave the stage, hopefully without falling over, and we'll roll the film. Thank you, Paul.
Thank
you,
you.
contributors.